about, so these are actual size.
Okay. Nice.
That's 14 and a half.
25 and a quarter.
This one
that's
was
26 and a quarter.
12.7. 27 inches. And these are like 26 10-10s.
Nice.
And that was the 45-pound 13.
And where was that at?
That was
Lake
on Lake
Austin?
Austin.
Sweet.
Yeah, caught those in 2 hours.
Dude, when they're on, they're on.
And then, I mean, you think those are big, and you got to see this. This is unbelievable. This is life size of the. Have you seen this? No. Life size of the world record.
Oh, that's gonna be awesome, dude. This podcast is finna hit. That's the 22-pounder.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Dottie.
No,
it's
this
not
is
Dottie.
the one from Biwa.
Yeah. Whoa. Holy shit.
Yeah. I mean, so you sit there and go, oh yeah, I could reel one of those in. Then you look at how big that is. You go,
Oh, dude. My buddies and I have always said, like, you know, so my buddy, one of my best friends and I, we've been fishing Ivy since I actually proposed to my wife at Ivy in 2016. Before it was all this, you know, #1 fishing spot in the world. You can raise that if you need to. Man, I'd seen a couple of double digits pulled out of there before, you know, live scope was a thing. And man, I was just like, dude, I knew that there was going to be a fishery like that, you know, out there. And then, I mean, man, there's 80 plus double digits caught by one guy, John Jones. And you know the lake record is probably somewhere in the high teens, you know, 17, 18, 19. The fish I caught, I don't know if you've ever fished it, but Inks Lake.
I've been on Inks Lake long time ago.
I went the other day. One of my buddies that I was just mentioning, he bought a house up in Bertram because he works in Sun City, just north of Austin. And he was like, hey, man, you know, they're releasing, you know, it's one of the only waters that they were releasing from. And we went out there and I was kind of just hanging out waiting for him to get off of work. And, dude, I ended up sticking a 25 and a quarter on a 10-inch glide that I just saw her going from dock to dock. And she had definitely passed her glory days, but I threw that right in front. Big head, you know, just real on her way out, but man, she smoked that 10-inch bait. I just saw her come at it.
I mean, that's like this one here, which, you know, this thing had a chopped off tail.
Mm-hmm.
And when I put it on Instagram, one of the other guys that lives in my neighborhood says, man, I caught that same fish.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent me a picture, sure enough, him holding the fish with a chopped off tail. And another guy sent me a text and said, hey, I caught the same fish.
Yep.
So all within maybe a 200-yard stretch.
Yeah, I mean, why leave if they're the big bad boss, right?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, was it BASS did that study that if you catch and release a largemouth, there's like the chance of him moving outside of a 400-yard radius is super slim. For 3 years, they track big fish. Yeah, 400-yard radius is what they ran, so they're in that spot.
So guys give me a hard time because I don't live on the lake. I live just kind of up the hill from the lake. It's 1 mile from my driveway to a private ramp on Lake Austin. So whenever I catch these big fish, I go release them at my boat ramp.
Yeah.
You know, because I'll go down there. Like last night, I was down there fishing off the shore because we got a neighborhood park, and just bait balls everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while, I'll go out there with a launcher. I don't know if you guys, you know, saltwater deal. Or
like a shooting,
with the cork, and put a Tony Aceta spoon on the back of it and catch white bass. I mean, it'll catch anything. But man, just bait. I got it in video yesterday. Just bait balls everywhere.
24 3/4 up on a seawall as the sun was going down.
Yeah.
It was just a day that, man, it was like one of those days where they were swallowing big swim baits, and it's definitely our best day on a lake. So we'll get into all of this once we start, you know, really diving in. I'm super excited, man. I've heard a lot about you. I had to do my research from I spoke with Jared Swayford up there. Man, we've been doing this a long time as far as fishing. Obviously, you've been doing it a lot longer, and man, this is definitely one of the most anticipated podcast for me because, man, I want to learn, and I know you're the guy to do it. So we're gonna get into all that. We'll kind of lay out the setup.
Okay.
I basically we start the pod and just basically I want to get to know who you are, right?
Okay.
Because I like showing that everybody and anybody gets into fishing, right? Like right before I came here, I own a company called Gold Standard Lighting. We do custom headlights, tail lights, studded brake lights,
cool.
and we've moved over to body match work. So right now I've got 2 trucks fully torn down, and I was assembling stuff that we had painted. So I get a lot of show trucks from all across the state, and even out of the state, and just regular guys who want to do headlights, tail lights, who want to see better at night, who want the custom look, so on and so forth. So I like showcasing that anybody and everybody fishes, from an architect to a guy who owns a business in the auto world to a guy who, works at HEB but gets after it on the weekend. You know what I mean? I like showcasing that.
Yeah, so that's mine.
Oh, beautiful.
The S2000.
S2000, dude, the S2000 essentially developed the industry that I'm in, because what they used to do way back in the early 90s is they take those S2000s and they'd rip that projector out of them and put them in other headlights.
Oh, yeah?
So Honda, a lot of the Asian brands, the Asian market, just the JDM market, all that, they were ahead of the game when it came to like now you get a F350 Platinum with road level headlights, turns with curves, all that.
Yeah.
JDM was doing that, not exactly that, but they were putting HIDs properly in projectors in the early 2000s, late 90s. So a lot of guys that started doing what I do now full time, they were, they would find wrecked vehicles like that, or they'd go to a pick and pull those projectors and then slap them in like a set of headlights. So so that's pretty much, this is more along what I do. So we take apart trucks, do full paint to match stuff. I've got a couple trucks, like I said, in the shop right now. So like that's a completed build that we did. Guy came in to get his grill paint matched, headlights paint matched, tail lights paint matched with so I came straight from there, man. I in the dang, everything just cut, the audio cut, everything cut, and I was like, oh, well, what we talked about was super organic, so we kind of just had to just go over. I liked it though because the second half, that second time, the vibe was a little better, it was a little smoother, and we kind of just talked just about baits, which is cool.
Yep. Yeah, we are recording audio. All right, perfect.
You good to go?
Yeah, everything sounds good.
You good to go?
We're good to go.
All righty, sweet. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Unpacking Yakin, and today we have a very special guest. I'm actually very excited to learn and just be a sponge over here and soak up as much knowledge as I can, because the guy we have on, man, he's been donned the godfather of swim baiting in Texas. that was from a guy, Jared Swayford. Y'all probably know who he is if you watch this podcast. We have Mr. Alan Bell here from Austin, Texas.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, we're going to get right into it, man. There's a lot of stuff I want to ask you. I don't want to waste any time, so we're just going to dive right into it. What got you into bass fishing, man? When did you start? Do you remember the age, your inspiration? Was it your father, your grandfather?
Started fishing with my father back in this is a long time ago because I'm a lot older than you guys. Back in the early 60s.
Okay.
We lived in Fort Hood.
Okay.
And we would fish, Cowhouse Creek and Belton and all these places. And, every once in a while we'd get in a boat, but most of the time we were fishing from the shore or off docks. And, that kind of morphed into, my dad buying a boat when I was in high school. And then, I can remember when they filled, Lake Bastrop, when they filled Decker. And, we used to fish those. That's kind of my home lakes back then.
So what would you consider your home lakes?
Well, now it's Lake Austin, but back then, as a kid, it was Bastrop.
Sweet.
And, I know that lake real well. I know Decker real well. But that kind of got me going. And then, as I got older and had kids and, I kind of taught my kids fishing, and I was kind of lucky that I had access to some clients. I'm an architect, and I had some clients that had some farm ponds and things like that, and so I was able to teach my sons a lot of different techniques out on farm ponds where there was actually fish, and they were going to get bit. And so you can't beat that, throwing a pink trick worm out there and watching it go under. And it got them excited about fishing, and then ended up, buying my first bass boat, and then, just kind of went from there. But, I've been fishing continually for, forever.
So since the 60s is what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's what we're at 2023. So you've been doing it for 60-ish years.
Almost. Yeah, almost.
That's awesome. And I can relate to that when you mentioned farm ponds to teach your son, because that's actually how I first started myself. So my father lived and grew up in Hunter, Texas, which is, basically right there in San Marcos, a suburb of San Marcos. And he had an uncle who worked for one of the guys who owned that sand plant right there on Hunter Road. And there was a bunch of tanks on the property that my uncle, well, my great uncle, I guess, my father's uncle, and the first bass I ever caught was out of a little stock tank, just throwing a worm.
Oh, cool.
And again, that transition from my mother's side of the family is from a small town called Brady, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Which is pretty close to Ivy, which obviously has become this popular basstopia in the country. So my other grandfather, we're fortunate enough to have about 400 acres and a creek. The Brady Creek runs behind my grandfather's house. We got about 100 acres around the house. And my grandfather didn't necessarily grow up and do a whole bunch of fishing, but he had a bunch of friends that had a bunch of farm ponds.
Oh, yeah.
And he used to
Oh,
take
yeah.
me to a guy named Easley's Pond, man. It was the best. It had one big log or one big, oak tree that they had thrown there, when they made the
yeah.
pond. And dude, I grew up throwing a spinnerbait right in that little arch of that tree, and boom, there was a fish every time. So I can relate to that. And ever since then, I've been hooked. It's literally been a drug. And we were doing everything from catching catfish on bobbers to throwing spinnerbaits to throwing worm. You basically learned how to love fishing by going to a farm pond, like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Similar story, completely different timeline, but man, that's awesome that you had, a father that introduced that to you. You had friends and family that were available to do that. You fortunate enough to have a bass boat way back when with your father to get on. And I've been to Bass Drop. I've been to Decker. I've done a couple tournaments on Bass Drop with ACK. They used to have ACK is no longer a thing, but they used to run tournaments out there with Bass Drop, Decker, Fayette, Fayette County, Coletto Creek. That was way back when. I'm a kayak guy, and we'll get into that. But that's
let me give you one for bass drop. So you go out in the middle of the lake. So I always put in on South Shore Park, I guess.
Yeah, it's like South Shore, North
dams
Shore
to the left.
Yes, sir.
So you go out in the middle, and this time of year, school and fish usually start in like June or something. Well, you go out in the middle of the lake. There's a hump that's about 2/3 of the way towards the North Shore Park. Mm-hmm. It's 40 feet all around, comes up to about 12 feet, and there used to be a bunch of hydrilla on top of that hump out in the middle of nowhere. And you'd see these guys out, fishing for schooling fish, and I'm out there dropping a jig
on that hump.
hydrilla out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, catching 5 and 6 pound fish at Bass Drop, which is a big fish at Bass Drop, and in a space about as big as like half a football field.
Gotcha.
But you would never think that, and this is with sonar. This isn't with all the new stuff.
The crazy video games.
I mean, I'll send you a text of where that is.
Sweet. That's awesome. So just to kind of make sure I understood, so technically where did you grow up? Like what city, what town?
I grew up in Austin.
Austin. Okay, so you Austin, born and raised. I see you got a old school Longhorn.
Yeah, that's because I got two bad hobbies, man. I got golf and fishing. You couldn't pick two more expensive hobbies.
Yes, sir. Like my father's a giant Longhorn. You go to his garage and there's a bunch of Longhorn memorabilia with that rendition of the logo versus the new one. So my dad grew up, in the late '80s, went to college, late '80s, early '90s, went to Texas State because he, couldn't probably afford to go to Texas. He grew up with immigrant parents, but he was a Longhorn. He is still today. I know they're not great anymore like they used to be, but he loves them to death. So that's funny that you grew up there. So you went from the bank to docks to then you, again, like I mentioned, fortunate enough to have a boat in the family.
Yeah.
Did you ever go kayaking, or did you ever do kayaking, or was it just straight boat and bank?
I got a bunch of buddies that do it. I never got into it. I got into the little 2-man bass buggy.
Okay. Oh,
because,
yeah.
Because I like the stability. Mm-hmm. And because I was used to, fishing out of a bass boat where you could stand up, and man, I kind of wasn't down with having to balance in a kayak, and so the 2-man boat was kind of the next best deal, because you can, even though I don't stand up in it either, but I mean, I just felt more comfortable.
Understood.
And I'll drop it in at Town Lake, or if I'll go fish at buddies' places, and you can throw it in the back of the truck. you're good to go.
So
Don't need
basically the
racks
bass
and
raider.
things. Yeah.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. And honestly, too, I forget, again, you were saying you were growing up fishing 1960, 1970, 1980. I'm pretty sure they didn't have the type of kayaks that they have
No,
today.
no, no. I mean, you might be in a canoe,
Uh-huh.
and we used to fish out of canoes on Town Lake, too.
Okay, cool. That was actually going to lead up to my next question. Do you remember the first time you actually went to Lake Austin and fished Lake Austin?
Oh, that was way back. Yeah, and not me is going there to fish. I mean, I fished there. We used to go. There was a thing called Ballard's Drive-In, which was kind of like a 7-Eleven, and we knew Mr. Ballard, and he had a house on Lake Austin. So one of the things on Lake Austin was to catch carp. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they used to have a lot of vegetation.
And I mean, they had big carp tournaments on Town Lake too. But I mean, that's what I remember was catching carp on Lake Austin. But kind of fishing it, going to catch bass is probably me and my buddy Kent in his little boat. In the early '80s is where I really started probably fishing Lake Austin.
I bet it's changed so much.
And yeah, I mean that's what because I live right next to the lake, and it only takes me like 2 minutes to get from my driveway to the boat ramp. So I mean, I can go down. It's like if you were to say, "Hey, let's go fishing." Okay, 15 minutes, I'm in the water.
Oh, yeah.
And so I mean, that's tough to beat. And so, I mean, and people say, "Well, why don't you go fish somewhere else?" And it's like, man, I'm 3 minutes away from what used to be, I mean, one of the best trophy fisheries in the United States. Now you can still catch a big fish, but it'll take you a while.
Gotcha.
And we'll get into that later, the whole
100%.
grass carp deal and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I got a lot of stuff on that.
100%.
But-
And I'm excited.
So, yeah, I mean, but I really didn't start until probably the late '90s when I got my first kind of dedicated bass boat. And since about '98, I've been fishing it probably at least once a week, sometimes twice a week.
You ever do the Thursday nighters?
Well, this is funny because my buddy Charlie Montgomery started a Saturday morning tournament, and this is like 99, 2000, and so we'd fish from 7 in the morning to 10:30 in the morning. And it was just a group of guys.
Yeah.
We'd bring our boats. We'd have 6 guys on a lucky day. We might have 10 or 12 boats. And I remember Charlie one day, we were at the boat ramp, and he goes, "You know what I'm going to do?" He says, "I'm going to start a fishing website."
Do you remember what it was called?
It's austinbassfishing.com.
Nice. Is that still running today?
Oh yeah, but he sold it to Terry, and Terry sold it to some other guys. But in the heyday of Lake Austin, in like 20. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, around in there. Anytime you would go on the website at night, on the forum, there'd be 1,600 people on it. And that was every night.
That's a lot of traffic at that time.
It's a lot of traffic. And, it power of the internet. I mean, my buddy Young and I are out fishing the grass along City Park. And I mean, this is early internet days, and we made the mistake of saying where we were fishing. And we didn't know that all these people were on the forums at night.
Oh, yeah.
And again, I mean, early days of the internet, and that was on Saturday, or it was on a Sunday during March Madness, because I told Young, I said, I got to go watch a basketball game. So I said, we left them biting. And I go back out the next Wednesday. There's 11 boats on that stretch. Because everybody read the report, everybody showed up. So it was like, okay, timeout. We're not posting reports when we're on fish.
What year was this again?
This is mid 2000s.
Gotcha. So 05 to 10. You would
Yeah.
say 05, 10. Yeah, I gotcha. And what's funny is we're going to definitely get into that as far as how the internet is a blessing and a curse. My buddy and I, before we started doing anything like this, we were doing YouTube, just for fun. But I made the mistake back in the day, put the name of the river, put the name of this, do this. And, again, you were exploring Lake Austin and those type of deals. I felt like my group of guys, we were exploring some of these rivers, and nobody had ever videoed them. Nobody ever caught these cast to catches. Nobody had ever showcased how beautiful the Llano was,
Right.
how beautiful the Guadalupe was. was in certain areas. How beautiful, there's rivers that I still won't even name because I don't want people to go, right?
Yeah,
As far as like to ruin the experience. Find it on your own, good for you. But I remember, man, I posted because it's old school now, but I remember because, like I said, I have family in Brady, Texas. There's a beautiful stretch of the Llano River right outside of Mason before you get to Brady.
I've been to Mason.
And I remember we did an 11-mile float, one of my best friends and I, and dude, we caught maybe 45 fish on top water, and it was hydrilla, clean water, and I was like, oh my god, this is insane, 5-pounders, 6-pounders coming out of hydrilla, we call them hydrilla gorillas, just to come out and smoke. And it was insane. And I was like, nobody has to be doing this because this is just too fun and too easy. Yeah. And then that video starts picking up traction. Next thing you know, it's got like 10,000 views. And now every time I go over that river to go to Brady, I see 5 or 6 people. And I'm like, God darn it, I fucked it up.
I mean, now that people are in kayaks, they have access. Whereas before they didn't.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of like that and I have to kind of educate sometimes landowners because I'm sure you've run into this as well. You get a landowner that thinks you're just trespassing, doing this. And we had this one instance where this guy came at us, hollering at us, just really getting into us. And I was like, sir, look, I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm not trying to be a dick, but you see all of our setups here. You see how we're packing in a camping setup and then we're going to pack it out. I was like, we're not blasting music. We're not drinking beer. I promise I respect the water more than you do. We're going to clean it better than we're going to leave it better than we left it. And we're completely legal, sir. I can camp right here. This is river bottom. That's your land. This is, and when you try to go, again, you still have those guys that might pull the gun out on you, but you got to just try to mediate it with, with words. And again, man, it's been an amazing experience the last, I would say 10, 11 years for myself, just getting out there and finding these waters. Yeah. We finally got rain yesterday for the first time in like 30 plus days.
It rained at my house for 10 minutes.
Oh, it rained at my house 3 times for probably 20 minutes each time. So I live right here right here down the road, and we got some pretty good rain. So that's awesome. So you're saying late 90s, you got the bass boat, and then 05 to 010 is when you were recognizing that, hey, the internet is this thing where people are getting information from, and we got to slow down on kind of giving away these honey holes.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that's about the time that I got into swim bait fishing too, about 03, 04, 05 probably.
Oh.
Jesus.
And
I was actually, you're right on schedule.
What happened to me
questions.
was I saw one of Butch Brown's grainy videos that, he's catching some, 12, 13 pound fish on a HUD. And, nobody had ever seen that bait back then. And I thought, man, he caught that thing on a trout. And then, so I started doing internet searches and I came on calfishing.com. And that's what got me going.
Calfishing.com.
CALI.
Gotcha.
CALI.
Fishing.
I don't know if there's an I in there or not. I think so. Calfishing.com, which is Rob Baloney's site.
Gotcha.
And Rob was kind of one of the big guys in California. And I mean, he built this website around swim bait fishing pretty much. And he had lure reviews. And so I started reading all this stuff and I said, okay, well, we don't have trout, but who cares? Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, maybe they'll hit this. And so my first swim bait was a Mega Bait Charlie. And it was, I don't remember if it was 6 or 8 inches long, and it kind of had I don't know if you're familiar with some of the old Lucky Craft baits, they kind of had this accordion tail on them that was kind of
banjo minnow.
Well, and so it was a trout pattern, and, I'd throw that thing out and make a huge splash, and back then it bothered me. Because you were always told, whatever magazine you read, it's like quiet presentations. And you throw this thing out there and a big splash. And
how big was it? You said 9 inches?
No, it was probably 7 inches long.
Okay.
It probably weighed, 3 ounces.
Okay.
I mean, nothing compared to today.
So what we throwing out?
Nothing. And, and I never caught a fish on it, but I had it on the deck and I would throw it because I said, man, this has got to work.
Because you've seen it work elsewhere.
Yeah, I'd seen it work elsewhere. But again, I'm fishing a grass lake, whereas, the guys in California are fishing clear water lakes, deep lakes, more like Lake Travis.
Yeah.
But so I'm thinking, well, maybe it's going to work. And then I got a hold of a Huddleston, an early on Huddleston. I don't remember if I got it directly from Huddleston or where.
Like second hand, maybe.
Yeah,
resale.
and I mean, but it was an original Huddleston Deluxe, and I'm out fishing on Lake Austin on the stretch by the pier, which is just a long straight stretch. And on the flat side, you've got a long flat that goes out to about 8 feet, then it drops down to 16, 24 feet. And it was all grass. And so I'm fishing what we would call the visible edge of grass, meaning you can see the grass underwater, and at some point it drops off to where you can't see that visible edge anymore.
Yeah.
And so I'm fishing that visible edge, and I'm bringing this trout bait in. You know, it's a slow slink Huddleston. I don't know how to throw it. I'm just throwing it like you'd throw any crankbait.
Yeah, you're just like,
I'm throwing it out, reeling it in, throwing it out, reeling it in. And I'm paralleling the drop off. I throw out there, I'm reeling it in, and I see a shadow behind the bait. And once I get it in, I kind of pick up I say, oh, that was cool. My bait's casting a shadow on the grass. So that's what I thought it was.
mm-hmm.
But that wasn't what it was. It was a follower. I didn't know what a follower was.
Oh, there you go.
So I throw out there again, and this time that fish is, you know, the Hud's here, the bass is here. I mean, he's swimming right next to it.
Mm-hmm.
His nose is like right at the body of the Hud.
He's checking it out.
And it gets about 10 feet from the boat, and that bass turns on it, headshots that bait. I see the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. And this was 03 to 05?
It's 15 feet away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a dog crushing a bone. And I was hooked. I was hooked. I said, that bite, seeing that bite was worth every 2 and 3 pound Senko fish I've ever caught.
Mm-hmm.
And so from then on, man, I'm throwing this bait until, you know, and I only had one of them. So, man, like every 10 casts, I'm checking the line, you know, because I ain't casting this thing off.
Nuh-uh.
And, you know, I caught a bunch of fish on it, and I would throw it where you would throw a spinnerbait, over the top of the grass, just swimming it. And that's when I figured out, I mean, they're going to hit a trout bait. So it wasn't any big deal for me, you know, to kind of make that transition over. And then Huddleston's a pretty good sized bait. I mean, it's an 8-inch bait, probably weighs 4 or 5 ounces maybe.
Depending on the sink rate, yeah.
Yeah, and these were ROF 5s, and this was before the jig hook. This was when you had to hang hooks on the bottom of it.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, that's how they were originally
It was like
made.
a line through?
No. It's I mean, a regular tie on the nose, but the ROF 12 that I got later had the jig hook on top.
Gotcha.
But I was cutting them off and using the ones on the bottom because I didn't know any different. It's like, how am I going to catch a fish on a jig hook that's that big? But I know now that you can, but I didn't even think about it back then.
You were basically exploring swim baiting.
Yeah, I mean, it was 100% self-taught except for what I read on Rob's site.
And you said this was in between the years of about 03 to 05 is when you can remember that first swim bait bite. Gotcha.
And so Rob had a kind of a marketplace on his forum, you know, where guys were selling baits. And I think that's probably where I got that Hud originally. But there was a guy, and this was another big thing that happened to me. There was a guy that was getting out of swim bait fishing. And he posted on that marketplace, he says, I'm selling everything.
From California?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was from California. He says, I'm selling everything for $700.
Gotcha.
And I'm looking at the list of what he's selling. There was 3 Okuma big bait rods. There was 2 Shimano, not the Calcutta, but the one step below the Calcutta.
Conquest?
No, that's above.
Okay.
There's one below the Calcutta. And he had Rago baits. He had 316 baits. He had slammers. He had Rising Suns.
Dang, slammers.
And a big soft tackle box. And I got all this stuff for $700, which now, if you were to part it out, it'd probably be $4 or $5 grand worth of stuff.
Especially because the age, the rarity.
And the guy was, now.
The time.
But back then, you know, the most expensive bait that you would see was probably $75.
Yeah.
You know, and that was, you know, handmade baits. I mean, that was kind of the price point.
Mm-hmm.
The Armageddon was probably 125, maybe something like that Mickey was doing. But I mean, it was Christmas, man. That stuff came in. I went, all right, man. I got more rods.
You got rods, reels,
and I got real rods because when I first started swim bait fishing, I was throwing stuff on flipping sticks. I was throwing stuff on Waterloo scrape rods. I mean, I was doing all the stuff that guys now can jump past because they can go buy a swim bait specific rod, which I kind of worked my way through a bunch of conventional rods before I found one, that would work for me.
And let the viewers know how important it is to actually throw swim bait, especially when you're getting into the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ounces on that type of setup. Like how important is it to have a dedicated swim bait rod versus just throwing conventional?
Yeah, I the best thing for you to do is find somebody that throws them and go out with them just to see the difference. That if you're throwing a heavy bait, you got to have a rod that'll load up. I very rarely ever throw over the top. I'll watch guys on videos and on YouTube, casting like that. I just don't do that. I always go sideways. And it's for me, it's always a lob cast. And it just feels more comfortable. It feels like I can sling the bait out better. But yeah, if I'm trying to think of an analogy. It's like, if you're 100 yards from a green, you're going to hit a wedge. You're not going to hit a 5-iron.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And that's the difference.
Yeah,
you could hit a 5-iron, but you might hit it,
You're
75 yards past the green.
Something. Yeah.
But it's not what you want to be doing. So, and there's a bunch of alternatives now. There's a bunch of kind of off-the-shelf rods that you can use that are perfectly good. The first, I think, swim bait rod that I bought was off Tackle Warehouse. It was called a Daiwa Heartland, and it turned out to be it turned into a frog rod for me, or a paddle tail swim bait rod, because it wasn't heavy enough to throw like a HUD. Because I thought I was going to throw HUDs on it, and it was like, that ain't going to work.
Nope.
But that big bait special, that Okuma that I got in, was a very good rod for that. And then I migrated to, back in the day, Shimano made a Shimano Crucial swim bait rod that today you can still sell for a lot of money. And I've got a number of those. And then I jumped into it's like,
there's so many brands.
Then you got,
rod makers.
I got into, and it's probably my go-to rod, which is a Lowdown Customs LDC, which is, those are the ones that I typically have on the deck, and I've had them custom made for your length of your arm and stuff like that. So,
now it's so intricate. You've got LDC, you've got Leviathan, you've got Daiwa. We actually carry a Daiwa here in store, the Daiwa XSB. It's a great entry level swim bait rod. It's rated for like 5 ounces. It's $100. Can't beat it.
Oh yeah.
For a guy trying to get into swim baiting that doesn't, that wants to dip his toes in, not really jump in full force. Yeah, that bait we got that rod here in stock, and that's the first swim bait rod I ever bought because, again, it was affordable, and it got me on the water without, I call it toad elbow. It's basically just tendonitis. I called it toad elbow because throwing a big bait on a conventional rod and reel, it's going to start to wear and tear on you. So when I finally got that dedicated swim bait rod, dedicated swim bait reel, I throw a Lew's Super Duty, and it's so much. You're throwing, you're just throwing adequate gear with adequate lure. So it makes it feel like you're throwing a half-ounce spinnerbait, but you have all the gear to do so. So again, I just wanted you to stress on how important it is to get that right gear, because I know we do try to kind of get people in the door with showing off baits that work, that are under that 2-ounce mark, where you can get away with, again, you just can't afford to buy a $400 setup right now. Right. You can get away with throwing a jig rod or a 200 reel. And I try to get guys on that to start, maybe a mag draft freestyle or a 6-inch mag draft or any one of the new, I don't even know the brand on them, but the sleeper gills. I think that's, what is it, Roland? The brand?
Stagless.
No. It's turn around. It'll be on the back. Just those right there. You can throw megabass.
Yeah.
So like megabass makes a bunch of affordable, swim baits that'll get you in the room without breaking the bank. So you can throw that on any conventional.
Well, and I even think like Throwback's making some minis, I guess.
Yeah.
That
like
you
a mini
could throw on
Woody
conventional tackle.
Yes, and then I think Mike, the bullgill right there. You can throw a little, You could throw a little 4-inch bullgill right there on anything, just to get your feet wet into swim baiting, to showcase what type of baits, what type of followers you get. And I'm glad you mentioned that word followers, because that's I think a term coined by swim baiters, because yes, you do get followers on conventional tackle, but you really get that like long follower on a swim bait, throwing like you were mentioning, on a grass line, on a rock, on a rock pile. You really see that big fish coming and checking it out, like what's going on. That's different. So that's sweet. So that is awesome. Now, you've been swim baiting for close to 20 years, in between 18 to 20 years, which is crazy. That's exactly why when I talked with Jared on the phone and Jay Gone Fishing, I don't know if you've heard of him up there, they were like, this guy is the godfather. He brought swim baits from California based just by doing your research, doing, forums. You were essentially the first guy to start and there might be other guys in a similar time range.
There are a few other guys, sure.
But at least from what they were saying, this is what, I'm just doing my research on the back end. So essentially you doing that got me into swim baiting. I caught my first swim bait fish in 2015, and that's about half the time you've been throwing it, right? It's only eight or so years, but I just remember seeing guys it was on Facebook, right? The internet changed. It went from forums to social media to now it's like Facebook groups, right? So Facebook group, I think I got added onto like Swim Bait Universe or Swim Bait Nation or Swim Bait the South, something like that, and I started seeing baits, and I was like, in 2015, I would have been 22, 21. I was like, ain't no way I'm spending $200 on a bait. You're crazy, So basically, I remember the very first swim bait me and my buddy ever bought. We bought them on eBay, a little trout glide. I don't know if you remember those. They were like a mock of something, maybe an S-Way. It was a trout glide, and I was like, my frugal-headed thinking was like, I just change out the hooks and I'll be good to go. And I did that, and I caught fish. I remember when I went out and caught my first fish on a swim bait, I was ecstatic. I was throwing a trout swim bait on the lower Guadalupe below Canyon Lake where they release trout.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where I put 2 and 2 together. I was like, man, I want to throw a trout pattern where they release trout. I'm going to proof of concept, and I'm going to get it done. I remember the day we went out, we got it done, and I was like, this is insane. This is going to be something that's always tied on now, right? Yes, it's great. A jig bite's amazing. A big spinnerbait thump is amazing. A Texas rig you grew up doing. But there's just something about it's indescribable. You literally have to do it to trick a fish by using a fish, essentially, right? It's so natural, and to do it, and be POV straight on, it's just, you'll never not have a swim bait tied on once you finally get hooked.
Yeah. And now I don't think twice about throwing a bait that's 14 inches long.
No. And it's so funny because you've been doing it for so long in second nature. With myself, I literally, when I go out and I maybe run into somebody, or I'll take my rods and reels to the shop before I head out in the evening or something. Got guys that work with me at the shop. They're like, what the hell are you going to catch on that? It's like 10-inch bait. Like, shoot, I just catch a worm and a bobber, right? And it's like, man, if these baits could talk, you'd understand, And I try to refer them to my Instagram page or my YouTube page or whatever, just to say, trust me, go look at the proofs in the pudding, they produce. And man, that's just, again, I don't ever leave without my favorite swim bait to date is a Matt Lure Strong Shad. I just love it. It's a multi-joint 6-inch. You could throw it on conventional rod. I was telling my last guest, I've probably caught 700-800 pounds of bass just on that lure because it just gets bit. And when we were bringing it from, you're doing it in lakes, big bodies of water, so on and so forth. My buddies and I were doing rivers, which unfortunately they're all freaking drying up now. But back in like 2015, 2016, it was golden. Nobody was doing it. Nobody was documenting it. We were throwing these shad. My favorite cast to catch to date, I still got it. I still have it saved on my phone because it's my favorite, was we were coming down this river, crystal clear hill country river. Hydrilla, he was with me. My other buddy Manny was with me. We were on different sides of the river, and I just saw bass busting on the bank, and I was like, oh man, that's a big fish. I could see just a big green black blob smashing bait on the bank. So I tossed my strong shad equal with it, and I pulled it right in front of it, and she just came and smoked it right by the freaking kayak. And then my buddy came over and he got a dope angle, and it's indescribable. And you know what? I was like, I'm never not having this bait tied on, and I literally always have either that or a glide bait tied on. And then there's specific runs that we've done where I know a 10-inch bait gets bit. I know, a 12-inch bait gets bit. That's not for every body of water, and I'm sure you can attest to that. But that's what my thing was, is you were doing this, bringing these swim baits to Texas when they weren't being seen or being thrown, so it was novel. I was talking to the last guest about how important and crucial throwing a novel bait is on a new body or on a body of water that's never seen that bait. The productivity that bait brings is insane, because it tricks those smart fish, like you were saying. And then you see the downside of that now in 2023, where, like you're saying, you go on Lake Austin and you're going to have to fish your ass off to get a big bite because they've seen everything now.
Yeah, well, I think part of it's too is if you're fishing Lake Austin, one, you got to want to be out there, because you're fighting water with wake surfers and wakeboarders,
fair weather anglers and partiers.
But it doesn't get near the fishing pressure it used to be just because of the boat traffic.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm lucky because I'm doing consulting work, so I can kind of fish when I want to fish.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can get out there and fish during the week and things like that where the boat traffic's down. You wouldn't catch me out there on a weekend. I wouldn't do it.
That was one of my driving. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was one of my driving for. And it sounds silly, but I think now, as I'm getting older, I'm 30, 31, I'm going to be 32 in a few months. I always tell people one of my driving factors in owning my own company was that I could fish whenever I wanted to.
Yeah.
And the big thing is going on a Monday afternoon versus going on a Saturday afternoon. It's lights out. So that fish I showed you earlier was 25 and a quarter, 9 pounds, and my buddy caught a 24, and there's 8.3. We went on a Monday afternoon because I told him, hey man, I'm going up on Monday. You go to work. We'll get on the water at 3. I'll fish somewhere else before, and we'll meet out on the lake. And again, that's just literally been a drive. Being able to do what I want, when I want, and how I want to do it in regards to fishing is literally my biggest driving factor.
I would think if I was to recommend to somebody that wanted to come fish the lakes around Central Texas, and you were going to take a long weekend, I would take Monday off rather than a Friday off, and I would fish on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Because the crazy people are gone, the boat traffic's down, you'll have the lake to yourself, and I'd much rather fish on a Monday than I would on a Friday.
Do you feel like these big bass, these smart fish that are 15 plus years old, do you think they know a Monday?
Well,
do you think they know?
It's just like that big splash that the swim bait makes when it hits the water. What my buddies and I would say is, hey, well, that's because an osprey dropped it out of the air.
Mm-hmm.
So a fish is going to hit a bait that it's not where it's supposed to be, but it just hit the water.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, and
as your justification.
Yeah, and I hear guys say, well, man, I turn off all my electronics and I do all this and I get as quiet as I can. I'm fishing next to a guy that's making a 3-foot wake surfing, and he's got his radio blasting it. You can hear it a mile away. I mean, these fish they're like downtown fish.
Yeah.
They're used to so much noise going on. I don't think anything bothers them. And, I've caught fish in the wake of a wakeboard boat.
Mm-hmm.
That let the boat go past and then cast in there. Because a lot of times, especially if they've gone through a school of shad or something, it'll just, how many times have you been out schooling fishing and we used to do some bass drop all the time. The fish would go down and they wouldn't be coming up. So it's like, okay, your turn. So, one guy'd get in his boat and he'd do circles.
Mm-hmm.
And it would fire the shad back up and then it would fire the fish back up.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about noise. And I'm not worried about other fishermen either, because especially if it's a conventional fisherman that, a lot of times you pass people or something, or maybe you come up on somebody, or a conventional fisherman comes up on me. I'll tell them, go right ahead, fish right through here, make sure you throw there, because I'm throwing a bait that's this big and he's throwing a bait that's this big. We're fishing for different fish. So I don't worry about that, because my mindset is, the fish that I'm fishing for is, every cast is I'm trying to catch the biggest fish in the lake.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, because I've caught enough 2 and 3 pound Senko fish that, and what's interesting though now that I upgraded my electronics last year, and I've got an active target on there, and so now I can see fish everywhere. I might not catch them, but I can see them, and it's just cool now in spots that I thought never held fish, and I'm looking on this screen going, oh my God, what is that?
Mm-hmm. Just a big blob.
Now, you get excited, a lot more excited, you're never blind casting now anymore, because you always got some kind of a target to throw to. Now, I can't say that I haven't done it enough yet with big swim baits to throw at a point and that fish bit it, because I'm so used to putting the boat against the shore, casting 45, and either sitting deep throwing shallow or sitting shallow throwing deep. I'm never looking at the electronics, because I haven't made that switch yet to guys fishing with their head down. I don't do that.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's something that, man, in the river, it's just not even worth having electronics.
Yeah.
I used to have, I don't even remember what it was. It was the last time I had it on my kayak was in 2017. I ended up selling it after there was a thing called a Tournament of Champions. You had to qualify for it. All the top 100 anglers in the country in kayaks would meet at a certain lake, and this year happened to be Lake Fork in 2017, and I had qualified with a river tournament to get to this. So it was just, I was there with a bunch of guys that were just sticks. Guys that have big units, the shade blocker, everything, and I'm there with this. I don't even know how the fuck I turn it on, and it's like green lines. I'm like, turn it off. So the second day I just took it off, and I just fish IQ. I just fish what I would fish in my home waters, and found some dinner plate size lily pads and just junk fished with the little cane thumper all day and caught 98 inches. So it's just, I've never been an electronics guy. I've always just read the water. I've always just tried to be like a fish IQ guy, just fish with my eyes, fish with my ears, fish the water in front of me, right? Like you're saying. I don't know that I could ever transition to a guy that's like, I don't know that I care that much. I don't know. I don't want to ever get wrapped up in bass fishing, maybe tournament wise, where it's so imperative that I'm looking at a because and I know you can attest to this, fishing isn't just about catching the fish, right? It's about being out there. It's about enjoying Mother Nature. It's about, I call it church, right? I'm not a very religious person myself, but when it comes to being out, out on the water, that's my version of church. So it's just enjoying being an animal on the planet, enjoying the planet, right? So I don't know that I could ever be a head down guy. And I'm glad you mentioned that as well, just because I like getting out there and getting after it. Now on lakes, it's a little bit different. We've drying up in the river, so I'm having to transition to more lake fishing. I'll still go out there and just give them hell. Like I just show up with nothing and go and fish and just remember old spots that I would go to as a kid, or just, on a new lake. Like I'm excited for this, not in a bad way, but how Canyon Lake is kind of drying up because we just aren't getting the water that we need. Right. I'm excited to see, because it'll be a kayaking haven for maybe the next 6 to 12 months till we get the water we need. So I'm excited to get out there in the kayak and just go junk fish. I've heard so many people tell me, you got to get out there, man. The grass is on top of the water.
Oh,
cool. So in the fall, I'm going to be hitting Canyon Lake really hard. So big swim baits, big topwater frogs, just fishing grass, just checking stuff out that has never been seen before by just, eyes wise, because it's always been 10, 15, 20 feet underwater.
Yeah. So before I was a swim bait guy, I was a hydrilla guy. I probably went 5 or 6 years and never made a cast, because all I was doing was flipping. Because Lake Austin, that's what it was. It was a grass lake. And we're fishing, Waterloo scrape rods. We're fishing 65-pound spectral line. We're fishing white line, because we would coat the last 6 feet with a dark green marker.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And then fishing Terry Oldham's jigs.
Just flipping mats?
And fishing the hydrilla. And for you guys that have access to a grass lake, what we would do is we would start shallow, and first thing you would fish is the mix line. And the mix line is where you'd have milfoil or pondweed or something, and that mix line is where it transitions to the hydrilla. So fish would congregate in that mix line. And then the next thing we would go out to was what I called before was the visible edge. So that's the edge where, where you can finally see, the kind of the edge of the grass. That's not the best spot. The best spot's the sonar grass. And so if you have an opportunity to go fish Town Lake now, and I got some pretty good videos on my YouTube channel of dropping what I call a slither rig, which is a spoon fluke combo, in what I call the sonar grass. So what the sonar grass is, you look on your graph, you find the deepest water possible. So you find bare bottom, and then you move over to where the grass starts. And that edge will typically be anywhere 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 8 feet tall, but you can't see it from the water surface because it's too far down. The bottom might be 26 feet. And so you're dropping down to 4 feet of a hydrilla that's on the bottom. So you want to fish that hydrilla edge, the deepest edge you can find. And that's where you're going to find the biggest fish.
Gotcha.
Because they're hunting that, along that bare bottom, but they can duck back into the grass. So that's the deal. And so my other buddies that were big fishermen, it's like, well, where'd you catch them? It's like, yeah, sonar grass. Because people don't know that it's even there to fish it.
So basically, just listening to what you're saying, what I took from that is transition points. I always tell guys that are getting into bass fishing that have been like, man, how do you go out there and blah, 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 blah. Like, how do you know you're going to get on fish? And I'm just like, dude, it doesn't even matter that you don't have a graph. I don't have a graph. That even on the surface, I know you're talking below the surface, but it's all about transition points. Bass, for me, I've been doing it for, as long as I can remember, 20, 25 years. I always catch them on transition. From a slope bank to a steep bank, boom, I'm always going to get bait on a crankbait right there. Rock bank to a pea gravel, boom, right there. Yeah. From, we call it chippewa. I'm not sure the technical name, but it's the grass that sticks out of rivers, and it's kind of like sparse. Some of it's real thick, some of it's that. And then it also goes into hydrilla right there. All that transition from the bank to the hydrilla to the chippewa is what we call it. It's just grass outside the water. And it's like those transition points are so imperative. And you just mentioned transition point from milfoil to hydrilla, transition point from hydrilla to sonar grass, etc. All different names, all different whatever. The most important key I took from that is transition points. And I always try to tell guys that want to get on fish, transition points is where they like to hang. And last time I was at Ivy, we were just kind of BSing around from my best friend's last float before he had his son. And I could see that. You could see some parts of Ivy right now are real dirty, real chalky, real dirty, can't see shit. But there's some that's still crystal clear. You look down 25 feet,
wow,
you can see those giant 13s sitting on a bare bottom. And then they have what I like to call highways. They either have like stickums on the left of them and grass and rock on the right, and they're in the middle, right in that bare bottom. And it's just like, I remember telling him, I was like, Manny, look down. You can see a common carp, a grass carp, and then a big ass fucking bass. And they're just all on the bare bottom. And my buddy Travis caught about a 11, 12. It was a 26 and a half, just busting at the guts on a frog on a highway where bare bottom, and he was only like 4 or 5 feet off the bank, but he had a bare bottom, stickums, giant rocks. That fish was right in the middle and ate it right off the stickum. And it's just like, I don't know what, the transition points, it's like they feel comfortable. I always try to tell guys too that I used to get a lot of guys, well, how are you catching in dirty water? How are you doing this? And I would always tell guys, if you walk into a dark room that where are you going to be? You're going to be on the wall. You're going to be on the wall because you know where that is, right? And I always tell guys, when you're fishing dark, dirty water, throw on a wall, throw on a bank, because the bass know. I mean, they're like, they're visual like us, but at least they're like, okay, I know where this is, so I'm faced this way. As soon as I hear a vibration, I'm getting it. So that's cool, man. Again, I love fishing, and I feel like I've done a lot with fishing, but dude, I like hearing somebody of a different time, of a different age, saying the same stuff that's just transitioned from over the years, and obviously it works for you. So let me get through the last couple of questions, because I do want to get into some of the stuff you brought. Have you felt like your fishing style has changed with age? Just like, do you feel like, and I know technology has changed, baits have changed, so on, everything has changed, but do you feel like, do you remember when you were like, 20, and then when you were 40, and then however to the closer you are now, do you feel like that's changed?
I think when you first start fishing, the big thing is catching a fish. Mm-hmm. That's when I used to take my kids out, that was the big deal, is I had to get them catching fish, because you got to keep them interested. then they kind of matured to the point where, yeah, it's great if you catch fish, but it's also great just trying. And so, but I kind of got to the point where, again, I caught a whole bunch of, kind of tournament kind of fish, that you're going out there catching whatever you can catch and, see what the pounds are. And then the thing that I'm bad about is I'll go out there and I'm going to throw a bait until I make the fish eat it.
Force feed them.
Yeah. It's like, I ain't changing baits. I'm going to throw this thing all day and see what happens. And, I've got 5 rods on the deck and I don't keep anything in my boat. So whenever I go fishing, I, get stuff out of my fishing closet and I take it out there and I'll, put 6 rods on the deck and I throw 2 of them because it's like, I'm throwing this one all day. And partly because, it's worked for me in the past and, I'm just out there, to kind of have fun. But, most of my trips now, I never fish all day. I mean, for me, I'll go out and fish 3 hours because I'm taking this bait, I'm going to this spot, I'm going to fish. Because I know at certain parts of the year where I'm going to go. So right now on Lake Austin, there's 67-degree water out there.
I saw you post something like that the other day on Instagram.
67 to 69-degree water. And you go on the lower end, it's 89. You go to the upper end, it's 66, 67 degrees.
Where they're releasing?
Yeah, where they're releasing water because it comes out of Travis 80 feet down.
Same with inks, what I was mentioning before we started the pod. We were getting on fish because they were releasing, the water was ice cold. Again, we don't have electronics, but when you jumped in, you were like, ooh. So I'd say it was probably upper 60s.
At different times of the year, you can fish Lake Austin and go find the temperature that you want to find. So, this is for years of reading Bassmaster magazine. It was like, okay, 70 to 72 degrees is what they like. 8 feet of depth is what they like. So I'm going to drive my boat up lake until I find 72 degrees and 8 feet of water, and I'm going to start throwing. So, again, because I live near a lake and I can get on and off of it pretty quick, I'll do real kind of different things out there. And sometimes they work, a lot of times they don't work, but, and I never go out there thinking today I have to catch a fish. But I can tell you after the grass carp were put in there was about probably 6 years where I didn't catch a big fish. And it was hard to catch a fish because all the grass was gone. And it's coming back slowly. The lily pads are coming back. Some of the reeds are coming back, but there's still no appreciable stuff that's growing up from the bottom. You still see grass carp around.
I'm not sure what TPWD did, but I know they affected a lake down here, which is one of our chain lakes, which the dam broke. It's no longer a thing there, but Lake Dunlap. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I used to fish Dunlap back in the day.
So Dunlap used to be a grass haven till they killed it all. There was a lot to unpack with that question. I just want to go over for people who might have missed some of the things you said, but there's some certain things that you say I like to try to maybe simplify or put in a term that we've heard before. But from what I heard about asking your fishing style with age, I've always told guys you start out by going and catch a fish. You mentioned that. And then it's a lot of fish. And then it's big fish, right? Those are the 3 that I always tell guys that are like, I want to get into fishing. How do I start? I'm like, look, go out there to catch a fish. Once you've mastered how to catch a fish, learn how to catch a lot of fish. Once you've mastered how to catch a lot of fish, then you focus your time about catching big fish. So that's something that I took from what you said there. What you were mentioning at the beginning, you've got the luxury to fine tune your fishing style now, which is awesome. You've set yourself up. You're at that age, you're at that time in your life, you've done this for 60 plus years. You know exactly what you're trying to do, and that's awesome. Everybody hopes and aspires to get to that point. So that is awesome. And that obviously fish are very opportunistic, right? They're gonna eat when they want to eat, and you can read all types of magazines and read everything about it, and you go out and try it, and it doesn't work for 6 years, right? Until you finally get to that point where you're like, I know what works, I know this. And I'm glad you mentioned one more thing I didn't write down in my notes was that you only fish 3 hours a day sometimes. again, one of my driving factors of being self-employed was to be able to do just that. Now I've got a wife, I've got a daughter, beautiful daughter, I love her to death. I'm running my business, trying to grow it as big as I can, 1-2-man show. And when I do fish, it's very specific times, dates, time of the year, time of the day, because I don't get out much anymore because I can't with what I'm doing, personally, because I'm not at that point where I can just take off and do whatever.
Right.
But when I do, I always talk about it. I transitioned into like the fishing type 3 hours. We always look for high percentage points on the water as anglers. I'm looking at a high percentage time I can get on the water now with my age. That's the way I look at it. I've transitioned to, hey, I'm going to go on a high percentage time. Low pressure, prefrontal, finally got an adequate amount of rain. The temperature dropped. I know the situation, blah, 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 blah. Right now, though, it's a lot of relearning that because we don't have water in the rivers anymore.
Right.
And I'm learning transitioning into lakes, which is great, right? But I'm not a lake guy by trade. I'm a river junk fisher by trade, right? So it's cool. It's challenging. I love a good challenge. And that's why I was also excited to have you on, man, as a guest. And I think let me ask this one out of order because in this last one I'll ask, we can transition into this. So second to last question I've got for you from me is what is your favorite swim bait now? What do you always throw? What's your Mr. GodFather swim bait, as the guys in Austin have dubbed you? What are you throwing that you're like, I got to have it on?
I've got a couple of them. Probably, I've always got a Depths 250 on the deck.
Okay.
And typically in and I've got some of the, the OG ones, so it's not the new resin bait. So I've always got that on the deck. And for like the last 2 years, I've been throwing the Hinkle shad. I mean, that's kind of my crankbait. And any size fish will hit that.
Expensive crankbait.
I got them well before the kind of
buyers.
explosion. I mean, and the stuff that happened on the internet and some of the internet guys throwing it just made the price go through the roof.
How do you feel about that? Off topic question, but kind of on topic is, how do you feel about the hype train about swim baits? Do you feel like it's killing the sport? Do you feel like it gatekeeps the sport? Do you feel like it's annoying? Like, how do you feel?
It's, I mean, I think it's good that a lot of guys are kind of getting exposed, one, to fishing. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it gets them out there fishing, there's a lot of worse things you can do besides fishing.
100%.
And so if you're out there fishing, that's time where you're not doing something that maybe you shouldn't be doing. So fishing's good.
Net positive.
I think you can probably count on 1.5 hands the guys that make a living making swim baits. Mm-hmm. That actually, don't have another two other jobs.
Income.
I mean, that's what they're doing. And those are the tried and true guys. If you buy their baits, you will catch fish. Mm-hmm. But I think it's, I don't know if it's going to wane, just because of the costs have to top out at some point. Mm-hmm. I think you're always going to have that frenzy around some bait that somebody's got to have.
I think a Hinkle.
And then it'll crest and it'll go down and maybe you got 2 or 3 of them and you're having trouble selling them. But I think it's all about the hype. And now with social media, it's I mean, guys are painting knockoffs that they're selling for crazy prices. Mm-hmm. I mean, and the guys are good painters, and that's okay. I mean, I used to do architectural rendering, so I know my way around an airbrush. But it just it's some of it's out of hand, and it's just hype, I think.
Yeah, the Hinkle shads are going for like 500, 600 right now.
I know.
One of the glides going for 1,000 on eBay.
Oh, that might have been like an unfished one. Maybe that's like, I get it. To me, swim baiting is turning into shoes, which is a little annoying.
Oh, yeah.
In the sense of where you're paying $1,000 for a pair of sneakers that you wear on your feet that walk on the ground. Again, I throw on my baits. I wear on my shoes. I like both. I have a bunch of Jordans. I got a bunch of, Yeezys, whatever, but I wear them. They're dirty. Every one of them gets worn. All of my baits have hook rash. I don't keep anything in a box. I like fishing them. So that would bring me to kind of the second to last question as well. I'm going to tie it into it, like spot blasting. How do you feel about spot blasting? And I know you've kind of already mentioned it a little bit with, hey, we're going to pull back on the posting, but
the only time that I've held back from being on letting guys know. Now I let my friends know.
Yeah, that's different.
But there was a time, and I got a picture of it, and this is 2014. I'll kind of go into the story here. 2014, my buddy Andrew says, "Hey, I'm on a HUD fish, and it's on the downstream side of City Park, and it's in this creek, and I know exactly where that is." Mm-hmm. And you can show me a picture of Lake Austin, and all I need to see is the corner of a house. Not the house, maybe the fascia on a roof edge, and I can tell you where it is.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know all 26 miles.
Yeah.
And so Andrew says, and matter of fact, that creek, I designed a house right there, on the inside of that creek. And so I said, man, I missed a HUD fish there. And he said, go there, set up here, throw, and there's actually a tree in the water right there at that creek. So it's March, it's cold. I mean, it's like low 30s.
Yeah.
And so I pull up to that spot, it's like 8 a.m. I make the cast, bring it in, I get slammed, set the hook, don't get them. And it's like, okay, I missed my chance. Mm-hmm. And he said it was a big fish. He said he saw it. So I make a couple more casts, I'll blown up the spot. So I pick up the 250, I throw it sideways along the bank, reel it about 10 feet, I get stuck, bring it in, 10-13. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay. I put it in the box. So I make like a 400-yard run up lake. My buddy Ronnie's fishing at the City Park boat ramp. So he's kind of on the other side of the lake. He's fishing a line of grass down on the bottom, and he's throwing paddle tail swim baits. And I kind of got him into swim bait fishing. He had caught some good fish that day. And I talked to him for a little bit, and I said, okay, I'm going to go fish this community hole. And so I talked to him maybe 15 minutes. I've been on the water maybe 30, 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I run up the lake to the other end of City Park, right diagonal from the other end of City Park. There's a gazebo on a creek that's called Wood Island. It goes back to Wood Island. And I pull up to that spot, and I got, it's all on my YouTube channel. It's all on video. I say it when I stand up out of the driver's seat. I said, man, this is a community hole. Throw the 250 out, and this wolf pack of fish comes up, and you can see it. You can see the fish come up, and I caught a 9.9. So take him off, get him in the box. I retie, because
two fish
back then
over,
I retie every time after a fish. Retie every time. So the wind has blown me a little bit, so I retie. I go position the boat again in the same spot, make another cast. Next cast, I catch a 9.9. Put him in the box, retie, reposition the boat, come back, make another cast, catch a 9.8. No, caught a 9.9. 3 casts, 9.10, 9.9, 9.9. And so you can hear it on the video. It's like, this is stupid fishing. Mm-hmm. All I'm doing is throwing a bait out and bringing it in, and I see these, there's a wolf pack out there.
I love that word. We say that all the time. There's a wolf pack of bass.
So retie, position the boat, cast again, miss a fish. First one I've missed all day. Throw again, miss a fish. And it's like, okay, I got four fish in the box. 10-13, 9-10, 9-9, 9-9. And back then it didn't occur to me. But I said, when I catch the next fish, I'm quitting. I got them in the live well. I got the water pumping. I got the Rejuvenate in there. I've only been out there like an hour and a half now. So I'm not too worried. And the water's cold, so I'm not too worried about the fish other than they're in the live well. And so I said, okay, next fish I catch, I'm done. And so I go into the creek, I make a cast, I catch a 6-8. Boat flip him in, and I go, okay, I'm done. I put him in the live well, and I run up to the, it's like a mile run up to the boat ramp, and I call the house. My son comes down, helps me hold him up. I called Ronnie, and I said, Ronnie, meet me at the boat ramp. I said, you got to see these fish. And he said, man, I got a bunch of them too. And so I had 45 pounds, 13 ounces in 2 hours. And so I didn't think about it then, but a couple days later, I said, well, actually that night, I said, man, you should have stayed out there to catch that double digit to get 50 pounds. Because that's my goal, is to catch a 50-pound, 5-pound sack. And so and Ronnie had an 11, he had a couple 8s. He had about a bunch of big fish too. And so we take these pictures. I go back the next morning. I'm out there, on a Sunday morning, bright and early that morning. Set the boat up, first cast, caught a 12-7.
Oof, what a set your
And I'm sitting there going, that's the fish I missed. That's the fish that would have put me over 50 pounds. And going back to the spot blasting, I held on to all that for like 6 months because I wasn't going to blow that spot up, because those fish stayed there. They stayed there in the middle of the lake for about 2 months. And I told Ronnie about it, and because he went and fished that spot and they weren't there. But he moved out to the middle of the lake, he and his brother. He caught an 11, a 9, a 8. My buddy Mike and Andrew went out there. They caught 42 pounds. And one guy that Ronnie knew quit his job to go fish those fish.
Hell yeah.
He was out there every day fishing
My
those
kind of
fish.
guy, dude.
And but I waited quite a while before I said anything about those fish. But what happened then was the word kind of got around before it got out on social media.
What year that was?
It was 2014.
Okay.
No. This was my old boat. This was 2013.
2013. We're talking about your 45-pound bag.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, so 2013.
And so the outdoor writer Mike Leggett for the Austin American Statesman calls a buddy of mine, Mike Hastings, as a fishing guide, and Leggett asked Mike. He said, "Man, I'm hearing about the swim bait stuff. Can you show me what it is?" And Mike said, "No, man, you got to talk to Alan. Alan will take you out." And so Mike Leggett calls me, and he's been the sports writer in Austin, like for outdoor writer forever. And so he says, "Hey, can you take me swim bait fishing?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm on fish. Let's see what happens." So he comes to my house. We eat breakfast and we go out there. We go to that spot. He's got a 250. I got a 250. We both throw out, and we can see these big fish that are sitting there, but they won't react. And he saw them, and I said, "Okay, Mike, I got another spot." So we go to this other creek, and within about 3 casts, he catches a 6-8, and I'm going, I'm done. I've taken the outdoor writer out to go swim bait fishing, and he caught a big swim bait fish. So we're good.
We're Gucci.
And we go outside of that creek. I make a cast up against the bank. I caught a 10-0. So it's perfect. It couldn't have been any better. And so he wrote a pretty cool article. You want to do a Google search, it's in there. And I think we caught one other fish, but we were done by like 9 o'clock. And after I caught that big fish, he goes, "I got the story."
Yeah. Sweet. That's awesome. So 2013, 2014, like I was mentioning before, this picture, which we're going to pull up here in a second, that essentially pushed forward. Did you start getting, this is just something that Jared had mentioned when we were on the phone a while back, is that when like Oliver Nye and those guys started hitting you up to come out? Was it after the story? Was it before the story?
No, and matter of fact, Oliver really didn't, he came to Austin, and I didn't know him. I fished with him once. I went out with him on Town Lake because he'd been fishing Town Lake a whole bunch. And I hadn't fished Town Lake very much at the part that he was fishing. I always fished the upstream side. He was fishing the downstream side. And that was one of the things that I did when I bought my first boat, is I went to guys I went to guides that were guiding at Fayette, and we're guiding at Bastrop, and we're guiding at Lake Austin, and we're guiding at Decker. And I hired those guides to take me out fishing, because I got a new boat, and I hadn't had a boat before. And so Oliver's been fishing that end of the lake. So I said, I hired him, take me out to the south or the downstream end of the lake. We caught a 7.5, I think. I caught it on a HUD. And I mean, he showed me some things on a HUD that I didn't know about.
Gotcha. And who is this?
This is Oliver.
Oh, Oliver. Gotcha.
And matter of fact, he goes, man, I gotta give you something, because and we talked about basketball most of the time. We weren't talking about fishing. I mean, it was a fun fishing deal.
Gotcha.
But I covered his expenses and all that kind of stuff because that's what you do.
Yeah.
You support guys. But he had. I remember when he came to town, it's like, what the heck is he doing here? And he fished Lake Austin a bunch. And I mean, if you look at one of his videos, one of his DVDs, I think there's a bunch of Lake Austin footage on there.
Oh yeah.
And he did real well out there. I mean, good for him. It back then there was enough fish for everybody. And if you caught a 9-pound fish, it was like, hey, yeah, great. But you had to catch something over 10 to even have somebody want to ask questions.
Gotcha. And that's kind of why I brought that up, was because you were saying 2013, 2014 is when that spectacular day you had happened. 2014-ish is when probably I started doing the research, like, oh, what's this swim bait shit? What's going on? Like like I said, my first swim bait fish ever was 2015, December 2015. I caught a striper below Canyon Lake on a what's it called? That trout glide I was telling you, I changed the hooks, caught a bass the next day, it's like a 6. So I even caught, the biggest thing too, one of my dreams was, that's when we started getting that like real like inclement weather in the winter where we'd get like 2 inches of snow in the hill country. So I remember like it was yesterday, I went out there, it snowed. My wife was like, you're crazy, you better be careful, don't be stupid, blah, blah, blah. I remember I caught a swim bait fish in the snow. I thought I was the coolest motherfucker on the planet. Like catching a swim bait bass on a trout lure in Texas in the snow. I was like, let's go. I got pictures of it, snow in the bag. My buddy Brandon went with me. He's a good photographer, dude. He took some amazing photos of just snow-covered hill with cypress trees, big old fat bass with a trout glide hanging out of his mouth. And I was just like, I made it, baby. Yeah. So it's just cool, man. Swim bait fishing will do that to you. And like I said, man, that's why we dub you the Godfather of Swimbaits here in Texas. When you had your best day ever, which we'll pull that picture up here shortly, that the next year or so, that's when I started really like, hey, I'm going to transition this. Because I saw a bunch of guys in California throwing, the castaic baits way back in the day, the half wood, half, rubber, the castaic bluegills, right? Yep. Just old school 1990s, late 80s shit that, like, again, my dad would just look at me like, you're crazy, go out there with a damn, minnow on a EWG and catch fish, right? But it just something about it was so intriguing that I had to get into it. I had to get my hand in it, and I'm glad I did, because I really feel like I left a blueprint for my buddies, and my buddies helped other guys start throwing swim baits on rivers in the southern part, not the central part, but the southern part. And then, like I said, we've fished just about every river in Texas, man. The Pecos, the Brazos, the Devils, which I don't necessarily like the most because it's high traffic now. It's like Austin essentially on a Saturday. Pretty much everything, man. The San Saba, literally Llano, you name a river, we've probably been on it. And it was amazing to have a group of guys that were that fired up about river fishing that we were able to go all over the state and just fuck it, 5 hours to the Brazos, I caught one of my favorite swim bait fishes ever was on a working class citizen out on the Brazos. And my buddy and I were just, again, it was January 30th, my birthday, and it was fucking 25 degrees. Ooh. And I love winter fishing, though. I love it because nobody's out there.
Yeah, nobody's out there.
Big fish bite. You just said 45 pounds. I love Super Bowl Sunday this year. Caught 2 7s on a glide bait within 300 yards. I love cold water fishing. So we were out there. I was throwing a working class citizen. I didn't have anything. I had 2 baits, that and the mat lures. I was dragging it, and I saw that fish just engulf it, set the hook, and dude, I was screaming like a baby. Yeah. I was like, let's go. Like, dude, we drove 5 hours for that bite. Then the next day, it was 1 bite a day. And I'm sure you can attest. That's how cold weather goes.
I'm good with that.
Yes, sir. The next day, we were headed out. All these guys were coming. We did the right thing. We went, again, I always go back to why I'm trying to be self-employed. We left on a Thursday night, Fished Friday morning, spent the night Friday night on the river, woke up Saturday to head back. Everybody and their mom was coming down river. And I was like, yes, we did it. And as we were leaving, I was throwing my buddy was fishing one bank, I was fishing the other. I got done with my bank first because that's how rivers work. Sometimes you get a good bank, sometimes you get a shitty bank. I got to the end and I was just like, oh, he's fishing a great bank. I'll just throw this, working class citizen in this one pocket. It was like you said, you could see the grass and the rocks and then you couldn't. So I was throwing it right in that pocket, right where you couldn't. First time I threw it, second time I threw it, third time I threw it, got bumped. And I was like, ooh, he's going to be pissed. I'm going to catch one right here. And I could see these big gizzards coming in and out of the, current. So I was like, that's what they want. So I threw the gizzard again, that working class citizen, let it sit, gave it about a 4 or 5 second pause, then started grinding it up and boop, hit it. And sure enough, it was another 7. And I was like, dude, this is insane. Like, this is why we drove 5 hours to get these fish, just to have the opportunity to stick them. Our buddy Daniel, who lives out that way, caught a 13 on the river. He's actually got the state record on a river currently. And it's at the Brazos. It was like a 13-1. He caught it on Huddleston. It was because they stock trout right there below PK. Yeah. So those fish are fat as hell, fat as all get out. And he caught a 13-1 that was just busting. Probably had 2 or 3 trout. 2 or 3 10-inch trout his belly.
I'm sure.
And in her belly, he was like 13-1, man. He was a freaking monster. He literally has the state record on the river in the state now from that fish. Good. And the next couple months we went out there because he was like, dude, y'all got to come in the cold weather because they just released and so on and so forth. And I love that river. I love that. I love all rivers, but that one's consistently got water because of all the lakes and the reservoirs up there. Yeah. But anyways, that was just something about the cold weather fishing that I did want to bring up. So, what is your PB?
12-12.
12-12. Do you got a picture of that one?
No.
No, you don't. Okay.
Because matter of fact, that 12-12 I caught. Again, it's on Instagram and YouTube. Grant Langmore caught 10 and 11 within 100 yards of where I caught that 12-12, probably the week after I caught mine.
Was that dock, that area over there, that like restaurant? I've always seen him.
Restaurant is.
Yes, sir. I've seen him post it.
The big fish on Lake Austin eat the big gizzard shad.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always good to fish the kind of the flats with docks on them. Because how many times have you been out in the water and you see these things fly by and they're gizzard shad?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love seeing them.
They're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And so those flats with those docks, and then also the seawalls around like the golf course at Lake Austin and under Mount Bunnell, you've got a lot of seawalls, and especially in the winter, those gizzard shads will run those walls.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you want to be throwing those shad type baits.
Yes, sir.
And the 12-12 I caught, I had seen a bunch of gizzard shad going in and out. So right where I caught it are floating docks.
Mm-hmm. Some
of the docks are anchored on wood columns. Some of them are floating docks. So these are floating docks. And, I was seeing gizzard shad, and the one place that, I'm kind of, I'm troll motoring by, just kind of looking, random casting, and I see this big fish over on the corner of this stretch of docks out in front of Mozart's. Everybody knows where, the coffee place. And this fish would come out from under the docks and it would go back in. And it wasn't interested in anything. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna go fish around the hula hut and go fish around the bubbler. Everybody knows where the bubbler is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't see anything over there. You can usually find some big fish underneath the actual hula hut because people are throwing food out, which brings the bluegill, which brings a bass. And so
starts the chain reaction.
Yeah. And so I'm working my way back, and so I'm throwing the Hinkle shad. I'm throwing throwing the Matt Lures bluegill.
The hard gill.
Or no, not the hard gill.
You're talking about the soft plastic.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I don't have any of those, but I have all the hard baits.
But where I'd seen that fish before, about 3 boat slips down, there's these guys that are working on an engine. And so they're revving that engine up, and it's throwing silt in the water. So I'm in about maybe 6 feet of water there, and there's like clouds of silt. And every once in a while, I'll catch a glimpse of that fish. And I don't think it was on a bed, but it's in a bedding area. And so I'm throwing the hinkle shad, and I'm kind of grinding it in real slow, and I'd bring it up. And as soon as I'd bring it up, I'd see that fish underneath it. And I thought, okay, this fish is interested. But, and then I thought, for whatever reason, I said, I'm going to throw the tube. And so I've caught fish on Town Lake, big fish, throwing an 8-inch tube. I mean, it's this big.
Yeah, I remember seeing the video.
It's tiger tube, I think. Bill Cementil in his book, The Big Bass Zone, talked about throwing these big tubes. And that kind of I read that book a long time ago, and I thought, well, shoot, if I can catch them on a trout, I can catch them on a tube. And so, you throw the tube out, it's kind of like a Cinco. It just kind of goes like this. And so I knew in the area where that fish was, in that silted area, so I throw over there 3 or 4 times, don't do anything. And then it's happened to me before a couple times where, you make a cast and then you're not paying attention. Something else grabs your attention.
You're looking around.
And I look over and my line's doing this. And so I reel it up and I see the fish and I set the hook. And I thought, I didn't know it was I thought it was like a 6 or 7 pound fish. It was a good fish, but I didn't know how big it was. And that fish starts grinding to get under those floating docks. And I'm throwing that old Shimano Crucial rod, 25 pound copoly, and that thing is diving. It's dragging me, and you can see in the video it's pulling my boat up towards the docks, and I'm trying to bring it in. It wasn't 15 feet away, and I go, okay, I can grab the net, which is over here. If I grab the net, she's getting under the dock. And I thought, I got a hand grab her because I can't waste the time to go get the net. So I reached down and grabbed that fish, and I pulled it up, and it was just one of those deals. We've all done it. You pick it up and you go, oh my God, this is a big fish. And so once I got one hand on it, I put the other one on there too. So I got 2 hands in the fish's mouth like that.
And you still got room.
Picking it up. And right then, these guys come by in a canoe or kayak, and they're applauding or whatever.
Yeah.
And I put it in the live well. I make the run back to my boat dock, and I got a Brecknell scale. And the first time I measure it, it was bouncing like 13.2, 13.3 but. I'm on the water, so the boat's doing this. So
there was that controversy in California about.
And so I put them back in the live well, and then I actually got up on the dock and measured it, and it was 12.12. And I said, I'm not going to go. There is a certified scale at the 360 ramp. I said, I'm not making a run back up there to measure this thing. And I'll tell you, I'm not a big fan of. Parks and Wildlife does a lot of good things, but they ruined Lake Austin, so I'm not a big fan of their Share Lunker program, even though, they've probably done some good things for some other lakes, but certainly not Lake Austin. But anyway, so that's my PB, and that was back in March, April of this year. So, and I went a long time. Before that, it was a 12.10. That goes back to a jig fish that I caught in the hydrilla in about 2001.
Gotcha. So 22-year grind.
Yeah.
For that next big fish. And we talked about it briefly 2 episodes ago about, for guys who are in it, like you are, who got the knowledge, the fish IQ, the Godfather, whatever you want to say, that it's different. It's a different ball game when you get to that level. It's what you consider, different between like minor leagues and the big leagues. But a 10-pounder plus is technically, essentially, a fish of a lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
So that whole 12.10 to 12.2, it's good that you said it. A lot of people don't realize, and I've got 2 questions from our just followers and people that want to get to know something about our guests, that does take that long, 22 years. A lot of our followers aren't even 22 years old.
Oh, sure.
They definitely probably are like, I'm not getting bit, I want to give up, blah, 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 blah. And it's different. You were going from a 12.2, 10 to 12.2, 12.12. But the sentiment is there. The grind is there.
Yeah.
The unwavering faith in your craft is there, right? And I think that's important to stress to people who are just getting started and to people who've been fishing for 10 years that can't break 6 pounds. Doesn't matter. Keep the grind, trust the process, so on. So a couple questions from one of our followers. His name's Mark Austin. He does the morning Case at 12 show here in town.
Okay.
We want to have him on the show, but I think there's like some legality issues like with him technically because he's like
sure.
part of like a business and maybe his voice and his product is owned by them. So he said, I can't be on the show. I want to, but let me send some questions in. So a couple of his questions were, do we get too obsessed with tackle? Is less more? How do you feel about that?
Oh, certainly. I mean, and I'm, my, I have a whole lot of tackle. I got a lot more tackle than I'd ever use. I end up giving a lot of it away, and a lot of times when I sell stuff, I'll hey, you're buying this bait, I'll give somebody this other bait. I got a bunch of conventional stuff that, I give. I gave a whole bunch of stuff to the University of Texas bass team. Actually, my son started it. He and his buddy went to the athletic department and said, hey, do we have a bass team? And the guy said, no. He goes, can we start one? And so my son and his buddy started the Texas bass team. So I ended up giving them a whole bunch of stuff. They used my boat in tournaments. But yeah, I mean, we get way too obsessed with it. I mean, you can take a Bass Tricks paddle tail swim bait, or a Berkeley, the same version of it. When that thing came out, it was the hottest bait. I mean, you remember when a chatterbait came out? That was the hottest bait.
Oh, yeah.
And the Alabama rinks came out. They were the hottest bait. But that Bass Tricks paddle tail swim, it was the hottest swim bait going. And I threw that thing for probably 5 months. And I caught a ton of big fish on it. And it was like throwing a spinnerbait. I mean, it was like throwing a crankbait or a spinnerbait, conventional tackle. But yeah, I mean, it's, I think you could go out there today and, throw a BBZ1 and catch big fish.
Oh yeah, you catch big fish on a tube. I've always seen tube fishing for smallmouth.
Smallmouth.
Up north.
Yeah.
So you're talking about throwing a big tube for a big ass fish down south. So again, great answer to a great question. Now the second question he has, because I know he's interested in swim baiting and started to get into it, and I know he's been a supporter of me and my boys as well, who just have really gone out and grinded in the river scene. He said, how do you fight through a rut, especially with a swim bait? So what's that like? What's the answer on that?
When I used to keep a journal. Oh well, I keep a daily journal, which I've kept for 40 years. I mean, what I've done every day.
Common theme with a lot of big...
Not fishing stuff. I mean, just
gotcha.
Just what you do during that day.
Okay.
But I went fishing during that day, so I wrote down about it. But I used to keep a fishing journal for probably 15 years, 20 years of date, time, water, wind, everything. And I got to the point where I realized I wasn't going back and reading it. I wasn't getting the value out of it. So I kind of quit doing that. But it just, I forgot the question.
It was, how do you get through a rut swim baiting?
Oh yeah. So I can remember during what should have been a good time, going 13 trips, not catching a fish. I mean, and maybe half of those trips not even seeing a follower. And, it's like, man, this is killing me. But but that literally the next cast could be the lake record.
100%.
And so that's and again, you get out there because you want to be out there. I want to get out there. I want to run the boat around. I want to see things. I want to see what's going on in the lake. But yeah, I want to get out and fish. And if I catch a fish, great. If I don't, great. But yeah, I mean, I've gone times, months, and not caught, not caught a fish. And I'm watching my buddies catch all these fish, and I'm going, what am I doing wrong? And swim bait guys, but then I realized too that when I go out and fish, again, I'm fishing 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, where they might be fishing all day or all night or something like that. And I used to do a lot of night fishing, but especially on Lake Austin, it just got dangerous because you go out there on Lake Austin at midnight, there's guys wake surfing out there at midnight with no lights.
I've never caught a fish at night. I fished for 30 years. I've never caught a fish at night. People are flabbergasted by that.
If it's, if it's full moon, you need to be out there at night. And I mean, there's been some nights that I was, when I used to fish a lot at night, that, when the full moon's out there, you can read a newspaper. It's so bright.
Oh, yeah.
And caught a lot of night fish throwing slammers, and
mentioned that earlier.
So, back then a slammer was a slammer. Today it would be called a wake bait. Because that's what it's making a wake on the surface.
Just a big old bait creating a big old commotion.
And bass always seem bigger at night.
100%.
That's
why I've gone.
The bite feels harder. The bait, the fish seem bigger. Everything's bigger at night.
Or the opportunistic, you always, maybe it's like something humanistic about us where like we can't see it, so our imagination runs wild.
Oh yeah.
It's a fucking up to 13, right? It gets to you, it's 3.5. But if I fall like a 10, I swear. So that's a great answers, and that was honestly not the first time I've heard journaling your day when it comes to fishing, because I've been doing this a while, so I've asked the same questions on guys who have been doing it a lot longer, and I can't tell you, I've heard it at least 3 or 4 times in my life where they're like, hey, when you have a really good day on the water or when you have a really bad day on the water, document why. Document the date, the time, the conditions, the water clarity, the day of the year, every little thing, because fish are a creature of habit just like us, and you're gonna find them in similar conditions based on your journals, and you're not gonna find them in similar conditions based on your experience, right? So, and I think that's just another thing where maybe before videography and videoing your trip was a thing, guys would journal, right? Because that's just what we did, whatever. Maybe back in the 70s, you didn't have like a GoPro, you didn't have video, you got a big ass camera, you didn't have nothing to really get your documentation done, but you caught 45 pounds, right? And then you're like, okay, well, today was February 12th. The water temperature was 68 degrees. Air temp was 45. It was overcast, cloudy, blah, 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 blah. You write everything down. I got bit on a swim bait 4 times at a transition point with the creek. There was a tree under the creek, grass under the tree. All that stuff matters. And I know that people are like, that's just so crazy. Like, it's just fishing. It is just fishing, but to those of us who've been doing it our whole life, it's not. It's a whole lot more than just fishing. Yeah. So let's get to talk about this, because I know you got to drive back to Austin. I don't want to get you stuck on 35 for 8 hours.
I brought some show and tell stuff, and the reason why I did this, so, back in the day, guys used to, you catch a fish, and, back way back, guys would skin mount the fish. And then it's like, who wants to do a taxidermy fish? And then it was, I'm going to have a fiberglass fish made and have it painted. And then you end up with a, fiberglass fish hanging on your wall, and it's like, okay, And then, we've all got scales on our boats or on our kayaks or something where you're measuring fish. I mean, you guys measure in inches and have tournaments in inches and all the time. And so now, a lot of the swim bait tournaments, especially like Swim Bait Underground, which I try to fish in that tournament every month, and I've fished in there a year-end deal, I think 4 times. If you win a month, you get to fish in kind of the year-end championship, and
nice.
I've done that a number of times. But now you have to take a picture of the fish on the scale, and then you have to take a picture of fish on a board, of the length of the fish. So, well, I thought, what the heck? I've got pictures of all these fish that are on a scale. And so I said, well, I'm going to go over to my buddies that have this graphics company, and I'm going to have them print it to scale. So if I catch a 26-inch fish, I want a picture of it that's 26 inches long.
To give a real life
So
view.
That's what these are. I mean, you can see how big this is. I mean, this is life size. I mean, it looks huge, not on the water or not in a boat. I mean, you're like, oh, no, it ain't that big. But you measure it, it's 26.5 or 27 inches long. I mean, this was at 1010, caught in 2014. So this was back in the kind of the heyday of
Swim baiting Lake Austin.
This was my personal best for kind of the same period. This was 27 and a half inches long. This was the 1210.
1210, what time of year?
Well, actually, yeah, it was March of 2013. So this was the day after the 45-pound. So this was the fish that I'm saying that I missed the day before that would have got me over 50 pounds.
And I could tell it was definitely in the cold weather,
Oh,
because
yeah.
look
Yeah,
at
yeah,
you.
yeah.
You're wearing a 360, you got your gloves, the whole nine. And I wanted to point that out, because I always try to tell guys, they're like, why do you fish in the winter? Why do you get up and it's 25 and the water's 31? Because big fish eat during that time.
So this is the fish that, and this is last year, September, so a year ago. And so this is what kind of got me the idea. This is the working class zero wood scale. And so I thought, well, heck, let's blow these up to an inch so I'll have a full-size representation of this fish. And, this was a 1010. It's 26 and a half.
Just so people can see, I mean, this right here is what they say you could guess is an inch. I mean, this is to scale. This is, fortunately a couple weeks ago I had a 25, so that's what they look like. That's what they look like. This is the size. This is the girth. You got a 26 inch this way. How big was it this? You remember? 21, 22?
Oh, I didn't do the girth.
You didn't do the girth.
Yeah.
So
I used to do that back in the day. I used to do the girth with my other fish.
Uh-huh.
But so I mean, it's mounted on foam board, and so my idea is I'm going to take all the 10-pound fish that I've got and put them up in my office, and I to date right now I've got like 16. So this guy,
I was gonna guess. I was gonna give a best guess.
This is a red ear sunfish.
Uh-huh.
That's 2.63 pounds, 14 and a half inches long.
Gotcha.
So 2.63 pounds on Town Lake. So it happened. I called home. I talked to my wife, and I said,
were you golfing?
no, I always wear, that's another story. I always wear a golf glove.
Okay.
Because I used to fish in Florida. I lived in Florida for 3 years, and I fished for peacock bass.
Mm-hmm.
And peacock bass don't give up like black bass.
No.
And so when you lip a peacock, their Velcro teeth, like the bass have, are sharper. It's like a grittier sandpaper, and they'll tear your thumb up. So I started wearing a golf glove fishing. So I mean, that's kind of my deal. I wear a golf glove. But this guy was 14 and a half inches long. So I called the wife and I said, "What's the state record?" And she said, 2.99. It's like, oh. And I said, okay, well, what's the lake record? She says 2.99. The state record was caught on Town Lake, so I didn't get it either way. But that fish, my buddy and I, we went over to Randall's on Lake Austin Boulevard. Yeah. And it was 10 o'clock at night. Everything was shut down. And we got the manager and said, hey, we need to go to the butcher shop and go on a certified scale and measure this fish. And he went back in the butcher shop, and we measured the fish. And it was 2.63 pounds, and I ended up releasing it, and it swam away. So that was all good.
I'm looking at I'm finding a red ear that I caught as well. So this is your.
And then this, I mean, a lot of people have seen this. This is the 45 pounds, 13 ounces, the 6.8, the 10.13, the 9.10, the 9.9, the 9.9. I had to call my son down from the house to come hold up fish. But that was I mean, again, a day that
a day to remember.
It's not going to get any better than that. And again, you don't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate it at the time as much because you were catching big fish. Mm-hmm. And, like I said,
this is the 6.
Yeah. It looks like the other fish could eat it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing about Lake Austin too, is the fish wolf pack around and they move. And, they might be somewhere today, they're gone the next day, they might be gone that afternoon. And they're real hard to pattern. Mm-hmm. And, but I mean, it's not like, but what I would say is sometimes you can pattern the other fish. You can pattern the bluegill spawn. You can pattern the white bass. You can pattern the crappie, and then go to the outside edges of those and fish for the big bass. Mm-hmm. Because that's what they're eating. They're
follow
eating
the forage.
Crappie and the bluegill and the gizzard shad. So follow the gizzard shad. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, there's.
So this is the one I was looking up. So this was a 12 and a quarter red ear that he took a photo of on a river, and that's actually the state record for the river. for that river particularly, and just the size of it.
So
and
how thick was that one?
It was pretty thick,
it was
but
probably
smelled bad.
it smelled terrible. It was probably like 1.5 inches, 2 inches wide. And guess what it ate? The Matt Lures Strong Shad.
Because this one was about this wide.
Oh, this one was maybe like that.
Yeah, I mean, especially right here. And I caught this on a 4-inch Senko.
Mm-hmm.
And when I caught it, I thought I had a catfish at first. I mean, those things pull hard.
That's what he
And
thought.
and it started doing circles.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this is a catfish.
Uh-huh.
And then this thing came up, and it's like, oh my gosh, what's the first? My buddy Kent and I was like, okay, well, what's the record? And we made phone calls, and it wasn't the record, but it was a cool fish.
Yeah, no, I get that. So when I caught that one, I was like, this has to be a record. We didn't have service at all because it was a hill country river.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, you're just in the boonies. And we took all the measurements, took everything, got back on TPWD. I beat the record by like 2.5 inches just because I don't think anybody had ever really fished for him. I sure as hell wasn't fishing for it. I was throwing, that day, I think I caught an 8.
Yeah, you
a
caught
20.
you got this one right.
I caught a 24-inch
cool.
8 on the Strong Shad. And that one ate beautiful too. That I threw it right on a river fishing and lake fishing. There's similarities, but there's also big differences. And it was a transition point. There was giant lily pads next to a giant cypress stump. I threw it in the back corner of the lily pad, came up, and as soon as it got over that stump, bait disappeared.
Yeah.
And that was 24 something and 8. So it's just that whole drive, that was back in like 2017, 2018, 2019, and that's just what really got me into swim bait fishing and what really transitioned our whole like friendship from, we were basically the guys that would go out on rivers. He'd bring his big camera, waterproof bag, and we'd get high quality photos of big fish on little rivers that nobody had ever seen before. It was just like not that nobody had ever seen before, but nobody had ever documented it. So we were going out there and
cool.
And we were getting the GoPro underwater footage.
that is really
we were
cool.
doing, we were stupid. We were making memes of it. Like we were doing things that nobody was. Just definitely my favorite photo that he's ever taken of me. That was actually that strong shad fish that just changed my life. It was 20. It wasn't even that big. It was just 22 and a half, maybe 7, but the eat was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it was just like, from this day on, I am never not going to have a swim bait tied on. And again, that's why I was so anxious to have you on. When you even responded to our DMs, I was like, there's no way. Like, let's make this happen. Let's get it going. I know we talked about it back and forth about what would work with your scheduling. And man, we're wrapping it up. Like I said, I know you got a long trip back home. So I do have just a general question that I always ask at the end of the podcast, just to try to give anybody out there some tips. I do want to make a collage of all the tips we do ask in the year that we do this podcasting, to see how many of them are similar, to see how many. Honestly, it's like a great book, if I'm being honest. Some of the best guys we know out there. So 2 to 3 tips of guys that are just trying to get out there on the water that you feel like can go from, maybe give 1 tip for a novice and then 1 tip for a seasoned angler. We'll just keep it simple with 2. What would be a tip for a seasoned or a novice to kind of promote them to keep a positive attitude to get bit?
So the one thing about swim bait fishing is the cast is never over. Reel that thing all the way to the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And always keep an eye, no mindless fishing. Always keep an eye on your bait if you can see it. Always be looking, 5 feet, 6 feet around, 10 feet around where your bait is. Always reel it all the way up to the boat or reel it up to the shore, because those fish will hit right at the boat, thinking that they've got a fish up against a wall, they got a bait fish up against the wall, bait fish up against a structure. So never give up on a cast, because you never know, what could happen.
Especially swim baiting, because that swim bait looks so real to that fish that you're just tricking a fish in the most purest form by throwing a lure that looks like the forage it eats day in and day out.
Yeah.
So great tip for the novice. And now what about a seasoned angler that maybe is going through a rut, or maybe is just looking for a tip that maybe they didn't think about, or something that you wish somebody told you sooner? How about that?
I think those, it's you gotta have confidence in whatever you're throwing. And so it's always, for me, it's good to develop a confidence bait, and figure that out. Just like I said, there's times that, I'll take 1 bait out, or I'll take 2 rods out, have 2 baits. I'll fish with them all day just to kind of build that confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you've got a confidence bait, it's no different than, you know, if I'm out playing golf and I'm 100 yards out, I got a confident shot. You know, and that you know you can execute over and over. So it's, you know, have a confidence bait, you know, and then, I mean, if you get to that point and you're not, you know, and you're not catching fish, or you're not seeing followers, you know, something's different. You know, something's different. I mean, I use scents. I know some people don't use scents. I mean, Butch Brown used scents. I mean, if Butch does it, I can do it. So, you know, kind of mix things up. You know, throw some garlic on there. I mean, whenever I throw HUDs, I use the one of the is it Megabass? It's the old kind of Roland Martin Yamamoto gel that I put on those things, kind of grease the thing up a little bit.
That's a good. It's funny because we do the same. We call it chichalit. This is what we say it down here in South Texas. A bunch of Mexicans, we say chichalit, and it's basically just your dye, your tail dye with dip. Like, man, I'm not getting bit. Throw some chichalit on that bitch. It probably get bit. You know, just in your mind, it's just a confidence thing. It's just like, well, if I was a fish and I saw a bright chartreuse tail, maybe they just think it's a bluegill getting away, right? So it's just great tips, man. And I can't thank you enough for having you on, man, coming all the way down here. And I hope you enjoyed it, man. I hope that, you know, it was everything you thought. We're really trying to take this, you know, slowly but surely to the next level. I literally came straight from the shop, and when we're done, I'm going straight back. I got a couple of jobs I got to finish up before the day. So, man, I appreciate you having you on, man.
Thanks
nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We'll see you on the next one.